Hello, everyone, and welcome to YMB Movie Talk from your movie blogger. My name is Sober Mansell, and I'm very happy that you guys have decided to join me today for episode 13 of my podcast. Now, this is my first live podcast that I have done in a very long time, so I'm a little bit nervous to this one, but I'm really excited to do this episode of my podcast. We have a couple of things that I want to talk about today, guys. If you want to get any questions answered on the show, remember to send them in the live chat and we can talk. We can answer your questions at the end of the show. But we've got quite a lot to talk about today, guys. It's going to be a long one, but it's going to be a fun one. I think there's a lot of things to talk about. I'm excited to get into talking about phase 2 of the MCU. I'm excited to talk about all the films in that and to really give my thoughts on phase 2, because I liked phase 1. But I'm excited to get into phase 2 talking about that. And there's a few other things that I want to discuss as well going on in the world of movies. So without further ado, guys, let's get straight into it. And the first topic that we're going to be talking about today is talking about the James Gunn Suicide Squad film. I think it was yesterday. It might have been yesterday. The first trailer for James Gunn's Suicide Squad was released. And oh my God, it looks good. This looks so good, guys. This is one of my most anticipated films for a long time. I think there's many things that interest me about this film before I've even seen the trailer. So there's a lot of things that I was looking forward to just going into it already without even seeing anything from the trailer. Obviously, James Gunn is a big factor. You know, the director of Guardians of the Galaxy, he's been able to make something out of nothing in a way. Like no one knew what Guardians of the Galaxy was before James Gunn took it. So you take all that in, you take all that together, and you're going to have a film that's going to garner interest. Just from James Gunn alone, him alone is going to garner interest, right? There's a lot of interesting casting decisions. Will Smith's not in this film this time. So that's kind of a big change. He was one of the main players in the first Suicide Squad film. Obviously, like I said, we have a different director, load of new cast members. But for me, the big one is the director. I think the different director and the fact that Warner Brothers are going into a different direction now with their DC properties is interesting. And I think the main thing that interests me, obviously, like I said, is James Gunn, but the cast is a big one. This trailer is a fantastic trailer for many reasons. It does a good job in setting the tone really well. You can tell this film is going to be crazy, to say the least. It's going to be a crazy film. It's going to be a fun film. It's going to be an experience to watch this with a straight face. I don't think I'm going to be able to do it. It's going to be a tough one to do, but I'm very excited to watch this and see if I can not laugh, because it looks hilarious. Like the film looks really funny, and that's what James Gunn does well with all his films. He has a very good sense of humor, and I'm excited to see how he brings that into the Suicide Squad film. Also, I've got to say, my opinions was mixed on Birds of Prey. I like Margot Robbie in the role. I think a whole film with Margot Robbie's Harley Quinn is a little bit too much. But I think as a supporting cast, as a supporting role in an ensemble cast, I think she works really well. And I think in this, she'll definitely work well. She looks like she has good chemistry with the other cast members. It seems like her and Idris Elba are probably going to have quite a lot of scenes together. John Cena looks hilarious in this film as well. John Cena looks really funny. Guys, if you've not seen this trailer, just watch this trailer for John Cena itself. He looks hilarious in this film. The kind of wacky antics that are going on. You have a guy that's like half man, half shark. That's bizarre. Very James Gunn, but very bizarre. So I'm very excited to see these. Obviously, my opinions on the first Suicide Squad film are well noted if you've watched any episodes of my podcast previously. I'm not a fan of that first Suicide Squad film, and I think most of it was down to studio interference, if you want to say that. I think David Ayer did have a good vision for the film, but it was completely took away from him and re-edited to be a film that it wasn't actually meant to be. This is 100% James Gunn. That's his vision. That's what we're getting. And I think the film will be a lot more smoother, a lot more streamlined, and a lot more consistent with its tone than the previous film, as we did get in the trailer. The trailer is full of funny jokes. It's full of this very wacky humor, but not to the point where it's too much. Right? When I was watching it, I didn't feel like it was too much. I felt like it was just the right amount of humor. I felt like the visual effects look good. The visual effects don't look amazing. Like, it's nothing that's going to blow your mind, but they look fine. They look consistent throughout. There's not really a shot in there where I'm like, that's a really bad shot. Like, the CGI looks bad. Like, the CGI looks consistent. So yeah, guys, if you've not checked out that Suicide Squad trailer for James Gunn's new film, then definitely check it out, because I've got to say, I think this has the potential to be the best DCEU film. I'm going to go straight out and say, I think this definitely has the potential to be the best DCEU film. Whether it ends up being that, I don't know. I hope it does, because I think it has a lot of potential to do that. But it's very early days, and we need to see more. I think obviously when the film comes out, we'll know for definite where it is in our own personal rankings. But the DCU films don't exactly go up there in as far as quality for me anyway. So it's not got much to live up to. But I think definitely this has the potential to be the best one out the bunch for me. So we'll just have to wait and see how that goes. But leave your thoughts in the live chat, guys. And yeah, I'll get onto that later in the show. The second piece of news that I wanted to talk about today is also DCU related. And that is the long-awaited, very, very long-awaited Black Adam film is due to start filming in 3 weeks. This is confirmed by Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson himself. He posted a picture, I think it was on Instagram, with the first page of the script, showing that this film is due to be starting production in 3 weeks' time. This is one of these films, I mentioned it a little bit on, I think it was episode 10 or 11 of my podcast, if you heard it. This is one of those films that just seem to be, it's never going to get there. Like, it's a film that I always feel like people keep talking about, oh, it's about to start this, it's about to start that. This person's attached to it. This person's going to be in this film. It's got this director, and it just never seems to go anywhere. But if we can we have more knowledge about it now, and we actually know it's going to start filming in 3 weeks' time. And this excites me for many reasons. Not because it involves The Rock, who I think is probably the best action movie star of his generation. As far as like the current era, I'd probably say him and Jason Statham would be the two best action movie stars of their era. So I'm excited to see how he takes this character, how he fits into the DCEU. And I'm excited to see how he plays this kind of anti-hero role, because we don't really get that from The Rock much. Most of the time, The Rock is the main hero. He's the main protagonist. Yes, he's a bit edgy sometimes, but most of the time he's the blue cut like hero, right? And in this film, it's not going to be that. In this film, he's going to be a bit more of the anti-hero, and I'm excited to see how that works. I'm excited to see where the story goes, and that also gets linked into another piece of news that I want to kind of link into this topic, and that is Piers Brosnan as officially signed on to be in Black Adam. What's the character that he's playing? I can't remember the character he's playing, but I know he's definitely in the film. He was cast in the film, so that adds more star power, more kind of quality as far as acting goes into the film. And I'm excited. I mean, this comes off the back of Helen Mirren being cast in Shazam as well, so we kind of get more talent being brought into the DCEU, which is only a good thing. And I'm excited to see this film. I'm glad it's starting to shoot very, very soon. We'll probably get some maybe some leaked photos come from the set. Maybe we'll get some promotional pictures, and then we'll get more of a feel of what this film's going to be like. And then obviously eventually we'll get the trailer and and then we'll learn more then. But as far as the early days of this film, I'm excited to just get this news the news that it's going to start filming in 3 weeks is enough for me. just so I know this film's actually going to happen, because it's like I said, it's one of those films that it always seems to be one of those films that are going to happen and then it just never happens, right? If anyone's been following this, I mean, when was The Rock cast as Black Adam? What was it, like 2014, 2015? Like, this was a long time ago, and for them to only just start going into production with this Black Adam film is crazy. So better late than never. I'm glad it's happening. I'm glad The Rock's going to be in it. I'm glad with the cast of Piers Brosnan, and I'm excited to see where this goes. I'm excited to get the trailer in the future, but let me know what you guys think in the live chat. What do you think of this film finally going into production? Are you excited to see this Black Adam film? Is it a film that you want to see? Is it a film that you don't really care about? Or are you just waiting to learn more from it to build your anticipation for it? Let me know in the live chat, and we'll have a little discussion at the end of the show about that if you want to. Right, with those pieces of news out the way, let's get on to the big, the big one, guys, and that is talking about Marvel. The MCU, shall I say? Yeah. Let's talk about the MCU's Phase 2 films. Now, in the previous episode of YMB Movie Talk, we talked about Phase 1 of the MCU. We talked about Iron Man, we talked about The Incredible Hulk, Iron Man 2, Thor, Captain America, the First Avenger, and The Avengers. So we talked about all these films, and my reviews of those films go anywhere from really good to average. There's not a bad film in there, in my opinion. People will say The Incredible Hulk or Iron Man 2 as like bad films. I don't class them as bad films. I never have. I've never classed them as bad films. I don't think they're terrible. I think they are problematic at best. I do think they have issues. For me, I mean, I'd probably say Thor might be worse than Iron Man 2. So, that's my kind of hot take on that. But I do like the films individually. I like them all collectively. I like the event. I mean, I love the Avengers as an experience, even though quality of film, I wouldn't say it's amazing, but as a piece of entertainment, I think it's incredible. So getting on to Phase 2, it feels just a broad overview of Phase 2. These films feel a bit more. I kind of feel with Phase 2, Marvel found their footing a bit better. I think with the building off from what Phase 1 did, I feel like they had their formula, they had their tone set up, and they had a kind of jumping off point now. So with that being said, we're going to start off with the first film in Marvel's Phase 2, and that is Iron Man 3. Now, Iron Man 3. This is a film that when it came out, everyone hated it. I didn't know a person when this film came out that liked it. Honestly, I don't know. I think it was mainly because of the Mandarin twist. By the way, this podcast is going to be filled with major spoilers. I'm going to be spoiling it all. So I've dropped my light again. There we go. Let's not break tradition. Yeah, right. You stay there. Okay. Is it going to stay? Okay, it's going to stay. Yeah, okay. What was he talking about? Iron Man 3. Yeah, okay, Iron Man 3. With Iron Man 3, I forgot what I was saying now. The stupid light keeps distracting. I swear to God, I can't wait until my house is sorted. I've got the carpet in, all the boxes are away, and I can get my proper lighting out, because I'm using my phone at the moment as like a light source, and it's very frustrating. It's very annoying. So going back onto Marvel's Phase 2, right? So we start off with Iron Man 3. This was, like I said, this was a film that everyone seemed to hate, mainly because of the Mandarin twist. And this might be controversial to some people, but I kind of feel like, saying that though, in all fairness, I kind of feel like the aggro towards Iron Man 3 has very, very slowly started to go away. And I think time does that because it's not as fresh to people now. But I think Iron Man 3 is fantastic. I think Iron Man 3 is brilliant. I genuinely do. I think from start to finish, I think this film is very good. Is it amazing? No. It's not amazing. Like, it's not an amazing film. It's not spectacular or anything like that. But for people to say it's a bad film is crazy to me. I don't think it's better than the first one. It's definitely better than the second one, but it's not better than the first one. The first one for me is still better than this film, even though I think this film's quality is more consistent throughout the film from start to finish, from first act, second act, third act. I think this film's quality is more consistent than the first one. But the first one had the first two acts in the first one were better than the first two acts in this. So it kind of evens itself out a little bit, but I would say the first one is better than this. But that's not a knock on it because the first Iron Man's fantastic. So Iron Man 3 is a very good film. It feels different in a way. It's directed by Shane Black, who is he's got a very unique style with his directing. He likes dialogue heavy scenes. He's worked with Robert Downey Jr. Before in Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, which for me is probably one of Robert Downey Jr.'s best performances he's given post problems, right? With the, getting released from prison and all that. I think that's one of the best performances he's give post that in this modern era of his career, right? So not the 80s or 90s, but in this era of his career, I think Kiss Kiss Bang Bang was one of the best performances he's given. And that continues his relationship with Shane Black. The way Shane Black knows how to get a good performance out of Robert Downey Jr. is very, very consistent with this film because he's fantastic. Robert Downey Jr. is brilliant in this film. He brings a lot more of a vulnerability to Tony Stark, which we haven't really seen before. Even though the second film kind of tackled that a little bit, we see that's one of the main key story points of this film. Seeing Tony Stark very vulnerable, seeing him on edge, seeing him very intimidated by things around him. We've never seen that from the character before, and I think Robert Downey Jr. plays it really well. He plays it very subtly as well. It's not like he's playing it over the top. He's very subtle with his performance. Even though this film is very out there and very funny, it's a very subtle performance from Robert Downey Jr., and I think it works really well with the tone of the film. This film's a little bit darker, I'd say. I mean, people always say, like, this is the Dark Knight Rises of the Iron Man films, right? That they tried to make it a bit darker and tried to kind of take what the Nolan universe did with the Batman films into the Iron Man films. I don't agree with that. I don't think that's what the MCU, like what Marvel were trying to do, what Feige was trying to do, what Shane Black was trying to do. I don't think that's what they were trying to do with Iron Man 3, but I definitely think this film is the darkest out of the three. Like, we literally see people explode. We see people burst into flames and die. Like, it is a bit extreme. Like, it is quite brutal in some scenes. But in a good way, though. I think in a good way because it raises the stakes. I feel like this film draws back a little bit. I think after the Avengers, I think this film is a very good palate cleanser for the MCU. It kind of brings the big superhero film down a little bit. It makes it more of a personal story. Tony Stark, for a lot of the film, is without the Iron Man suit. So if you're coming into this film expecting loads of Iron Man, you won't get it. This is a Tony Stark story. This is a very much a character-driven story, similar to the first one in that sense. But this is a very character-driven story. So if you're expecting a lot of Iron Man, you won't really get it. It's more of a personal story. I think the performances in this film overall are very good. Even though I don't think Guy Pearce's character was really that interesting, his performance is decent in it. Like, he plays the slimy businessman well. He plays that character quite well, and it works for what the film's going for. So I'm not gonna slight his performance too much. Ben Kingsley as the Mandarin, he's not really the Mandarin, he's Trevor Slattery, but for half of the film, he's this fake Mandarin character. And that Ben Kingsley is incredible. Like, if that was the version of the Mandarin that we got, I don't think anyone could say anything because that would have been perfect. Like, that version of the Mandarin, if we would have got that, it's a very updated version of the character, making him like almost like a Bin Laden terrorist leader kind of character, taking inspiration from real world events. I think if we would have got that version of the Mandarin as our actual Mandarin, I think it would have been brilliant. But they played the little twist, and I think in the context of the story, it works, I guess. That is the weakest part of the film, even now. I think it's a funny twist. Like the scene that reveals Trevor Slattery to be the fake Mandarin, it's a funny scene. Like Ben Kingsley plays it really well. He's very funny in that scene. I just think it's a bit of a slap in the face a little bit. And I don't dislike the Mandarin twist because it's against what the character is in the comics, right? That's not my reasoning for not liking the twist. The reason I don't like the twist is because they set up the character so well. They set up the character so well. You really get invested into this character of the Mandarin. You get so invested into it. Like you said, it draws on real world events with like ISIS and Bin Laden and all this. It takes that kind of real world inspiration and brings it into the MCU, and it's very relatable. Like terrorism is a big scare for a lot of people. So I think it's a good thing to bring into an Iron Man film, because the Iron Man films have always been seen as the most kind of realistic MCU films. I guess it's kind of more based in real world technology and stuff. So having like the villain of this film being like a full blown terrorist would have been incredible. And then we find out that it's actually Guy Pearce's character who's like leading AIM with this extremist thing that he's got, where it gives people these like incredible powers, but if it doesn't react well to your DNA, you can basically die and explode. So it's a very weird story in that sense, because I feel like if they would have just kept the Mandarin as the main villain, this film would have been amazing. Like I think if they would have cut out the Guy Pearce character, right? If they would have cut out his character and just had the focus be Tony versus the Ten Rings. Don't forget the Ten Rings is the same organization that captured Tony in the first film. So there's already that built-in kind of continuity there with this story. It kind of rolls back to the first film a little bit. So that's a big thing there. If they would have kept that if they would have kept that throughout the entire film, I think a lot of people would have really loved that. Have it where the Ten Rings then attack Tony, keep it more or less the same. The Ten Ringers attack Tony at his house. Tony then basically gets exiled into nowhere, meets the kid and all that. Keep that all in there, because I think that's really good. And I think if they would have done that, and then instead of having the twist, he goes against the Ten Rings and he has to kind of bring down the Mandarin because he's giving out these extremists, this extremist virus that's killing people, right? He's the one that's doing this. All the explosions are caused by people actually exploding. I think that would have been a very, very good story, and it's a shame that we didn't get that. I think there's a bit of a missed opportunity. I know we're getting the Mandarin in Shang-Chi. But I think this was a bit of a missed opportunity because the character was set up so well. It just was. It was a really well set up character. But I think it's not to the point where it ruins the film. It's not to that point. It's not to the point where it ruins it. It's still really fun. It's still a really funny film. It's a very good character-driven story for Tony Stark. I just think the villain thing is a bit of a problem. And this is a problem that's kind of tainted all of the MCU films, really, except from maybe the first Iron Man before Obadiah Stane became the Ironmonger. And maybe definitely Loki in Avengers, but except from that, really, we don't have good villains in this series. We don't really have good villains in the MCU, and it kind of continues that. I think we could have got a great villain if Ben Kingsley's Mandarin would have actually been the Mandarin, but we didn't end up getting that. So that's a bit of a problem. The villain story isn't very compelling. But away from that, the film is still really good. It's very consistent. It's very consistent all the way through. There's no part in this film where you are just like, oh, really? This? Like, we don't get the big CGI Iron Man fight against the other big CGI Iron Man. We don't get that in this film. You know, Tony has to use his intellect more and use his wit more than he had to in the other films. He wasn't as reliant on technology in this one. He was more. You get to see Tony being smart and being ingenuitive and being creative with what he's doing, and I think that works really well for this. So, like I said, shame we didn't get the Mandarin, but I still really like this film. And I think if you haven't watched it for a while, give it a second chance. Give it a second chance and then come back to me, tell me what you think about it, because I think your opinion probably will change on it. If you really hated it the first time round, give it another try, see how it is, and then let me know what you think about that. Right. Going on to the next film in the series. Do you know how happy I am that there's no Dutch angles in this film? Oh, God, right. We're going to be talking about Thor the Dark World. For those of you who listened to my Thor review on my last podcast, you will know my biggest problem with that film is the Dutch angles. Thankfully, no Dutch angles. They're gone. I'm so happy. And unfortunately, that's the best thing I can say about this film. Thor the Dark World is boring. It's so boring. This was a drag to get through. I watched it the other day, and honestly, I felt like I was going to fall asleep. This film is so boring. Nothing happens in this film. I swear. Okay, right. I'll start with the positives first. First positive, no Dutch angles. So we're already kind of, that's a strong positive over the first one. Music's still really good. Brian Tyler does really good with the score. The visual effects are a lot better than they were in the first film. The visual effects are really good throughout the entire film. Tom Hiddleston is incredible as Loki, probably better than he was in the Avengers for me. He was fantastic in the film. Chris Hemsworth was good, if not a little bit boring, maybe. He's too serious in this film, I think. There's not enough Thor being... I don't think they really capitalize on Hemsworth's comedic ability in this film. He's very stale in a way. I don't really think he's all right in the film. I'm not going to say he's bad. He's not bad in the film. He's just kind of boring, and that's hard. To like a film where the main character's boring is a bit of a problem. But away from that, this film is really bad. And what I mean when I say bad is that everything away from some of the performances, the better visual effects and the better cinematography, everything in the story of this film is so uninspired. Like, it literally feels like they went on like some automated script creator, typed in some ideas, typed in red sludge, London, dark elf, and it just created this very generic script. The villain is probably the worst villain out of any MCU film. Christopher Eccleston's one of my favorite actors ever. I love his version of the Doctor. He's a really good dramatic actor. He was fantastic in loads of films. In this film, oh my God. And I'm not putting this on Chris Eccleston either. He had nothing to do in this film. He had nothing to do in this film. This is the worst villain ever. Malekith is awful. The motivations of this character just don't make sense. So basically, the motivation of the character is that he's the leader of the Dark Elves. They used to have this unbelievable power of the ether, which we later find out is one of the Infinity Stones, right? Which is the Reality Stones. Yeah, I think it's the Reality Stone. That's what they have in their possession. Odin's dad, which is Thor's grandfather, basically led a rebellion against the Dark Elves, captured the ether, and then left the Dark Elves basically to die. They all went into hiding for years later. Jane Foster finds the ether that then awakens the Dark Elves, and the Dark Elves, led by Malekith, want to come back and take the ether back so they can use that power to destroy the world. Basically, that's the story of the film. That's how uninspired this film is. I've literally told you the synopsis of the film within about 10 seconds. Like, it's so bad. And he's just a terrible villain. Motivations aren't that good. It's the generic mustache twirling villain. You stole things from me, so I'll now take it back story. And it's just boring. We've seen it 1,000 times. There's nothing new. Eccleston's playing the character, in all fairness, very dry and very droll, and not a lot of character. There's not a lot of personality there, really. Whether that's from Eccleston himself or whether it's from the director, Alan Taylor, I don't know. But whoever it was from, it was a bad idea, because this villain sucks badly. So that's a big problem with Thor: The Dark World. Once again, the love story between Jane and Thor is terrible. Again, judging from how badly received it was in the first film, I'm surprised they even give this another chance. I know she's coming back in Thor: Love and Thunder, but they're taking the character into a completely different direction than she was in these films. Still having to be this astrophysicist who's trying to find Thor. I mean, she's madly in love with him. She can't get over him. She can't date anybody else. She literally knew him for a few days. She knew him for like a long weekend. And years later, she can't even go to a meal with a guy without thinking about Thor. Her character is pathetic in this film, man. And it's not that Natalie Portman's bad either. She's not bad in the film. It's just, again, her character. And this is the thing. The worst part of this film is the story and the screenplay. Those are the worst parts of this film. The directing isn't that bad. The acting isn't that bad. The effects are pretty good. The cinematography is pretty good. The music's pretty good. It's just the story and the screenplay and the character motivations in this film are just so boring and uninspired. It's just so bad, guys. Honestly, I would say this is the most unwatchable film in the MCU. More than The Incredible Hulk. Even more unwatchable than The Incredible Hulk, because at least The Incredible Hulk had a good kind of visual style to it. At least it had good music, and at least it had a little bit of tension in there. There's a bit of a bit of thriller elements in that film, and you actually cared about the character of Bruce Banner. Where in this film, you don't care about any of the characters. None of the characters you give a toss about. None of them. From Thor to Odin, Thor's mom dies in this film and you don't care because you don't know her. You've literally had, for both Thor films, probably about 4 scenes with this character, and you're expected to care when she dies, and they really overplay it like it's this big moment. If they would have killed Odin instead of Frigga, if they would have killed Odin, then I could understand making this big deal out of it, because they really built Odin up. We don't even know Thor's mom. I'm surprised I even know her name. It's that bad. And we're expected to care about this scene. They play they even take the mick out of it, don't they, in Thor Ragnarok at the start, right? When they kind of play it off as a joke. It's just so over the top, so melodramatic. It's just boring, guys. And the end fight scene, the only good thing, actually, another good thing I like in this film is in the end fight scene where there's all the portals in the sky, and we have Mjolnir, which is Thor's hammer, go between the different portals and go and try to find Thor throughout these different worlds. That was really entertaining. That was really creative and entertaining, and you can tell This was created by someone who's actually got a bit of idea of what to do. It's not just the same generic boring crap. Like, it's actually entertaining and it's creative, and it's a bit different. That was good. I love that. But that's for what, 5 minutes? Probably less than that. The rest of the film's just boring. And yeah, if you're gonna skip any, I mean, you can't skip this film really, because it does get referenced later in Endgame, and they this is the film that really sets up the idea of the Infinity Stones, really. So you can't miss it for the narrative reasons. But as a quality of a film, oh my god. If ever you want to skip a film that's mediocre, skip this film. It's so boring. Right. With Thor the Dark World out of the way, let's get on to the good stuff. I'm excited to talk about this one. Right. I now present to you the best film out the entire MCU, and that is Captain America the Winter Soldier. Bold statement, maybe, but this is definitely, for me, the best film out the MCU. It was the best film in the MCU when I first saw it. It's the best film in the MCU years later when I rewatched it before Civil War. It's the best film still in the MCU before I watched Endgame, after Endgame, and when I did this recap. It's still the best film out of the entire MCU. This film is so good. This film, for me, is... it's up there with being one of the best comic book movies ever made. Right up there with Joker, right up there with The Dark Knight, right up there with like the original Superman as far as its like importance. You know, it's right up there for me. This film is incredible from start to finish. It's absolutely phenomenal. And you might ask, why is it so phenomenal? Like, what is it in this film that you find so good to say it's one of the best films ever made in its respective genre? And I'll get to the positives first. I'm not saying this film's perfect. No film's perfect, and there is some negatives that I'll get onto, but they're very minor. Like, the negatives are very minor in this film. So I'll get onto those in a bit. Talking about the positives of this film, where do I even start? This film really, really... the story of this film is one of the best stories in the MCU. The character of Captain America is given so much kind of heart and respect in this film. And when you're probably like thinking, what do you mean by that? What do you mean he's given respect? Like, if you watch the Avengers, that the character of Captain America is probably the most boring character in the film, because they just have him be this almost like a quip machine, because he's the man out of time. He doesn't understand references to things. They take that idea of Captain America being the man out of time and completely go for it. The Russo brothers take the idea of the man out of time and really play on that in this political thriller, suspenseful action film that makes a good commentary about corruption, about loyalty. It's just brilliant, guy. Honestly, I'm struggling to really know where to start with this film. Okay, we'll go from the first scene. Yeah, let's go from the first scene, the on your left scene, the introduction of Sam Wilson. We even that sets up the type of character that Captain America is. He's got the list, right, with all the little different references on to different things that he's missed over time. You know, he sleeps in this little apartment. He's going on these missions. He's working for S.H.I.E.L.D. And even though he's working for S.H.I.E.L.D., which is like the modern version of like like an army in a way, it's like a secret service type of army, division. He questions things. He questions the morality of the people around him. What the Russo brothers and the screenwriters, Marcus and McFeely, do really well is they really kind of embrace the fact that Captain America is going to have a completely different view on the world than the other people around him. And that's how you do the man out of time thing. You take a man from the 1930s or 1950s or whatever, and you take that character and you put them into modern day with technology and, you know, all these different new things in the world that weren't around then. And you bring that man into a modern day society, and his view of the world, especially like a character with Captain America who's so good at heart and so patriotic and so about doing the right thing, you put that character in a corrupt government setting, and it just creates this thing where you can't not watch what you're seeing. Like every scene, you kind of know where it's going to go, right? You kind of know that there's something going on. Even at the start, when Fury and Cap are having that discussion under the helicarrier, right? And they're saying about, Fury's saying about Project Insight, where they can monitor all these people on the world. They'll be able to monitor potential threats to S.H.I.E.L.D. And basically get rid of them before they become a problem. And it's that line that Captain America says that, this isn't freedom, this is fear. It's not right to invade people's privacy like this. It's not right to kind of invade people's lives in a way and not let people's lives play out in the way that they can do, not in the way that people think they will. And that kind of mindset it always creates these scenes throughout the film. Scenes with Nicholas Fury, who's played brilliantly by Sam Jackson, is amazing in this film. With the scenes with Black Widow, the scenes with Sam Wilson, the scenes with Bucky, obviously who's the Winter Soldier, these different scenes, you get that man out of time and you put them into this modern society, and it just creates this very tense political thriller. And the character of Captain America works probably better than any other character that would in this series, right? If you try and give Iron Man this story, it doesn't work. You try and give Bruce Banner this story, it doesn't work. This story works brilliantly for a Captain America film, because especially coming off the Avengers and coming off the first film, we know enough about the character to sympathize with him. So when all these people that he's trusting are letting him down and going behind his back, and Hydra, he's been working for Hydra all this time, right? It goes against everything he's ever stood for. You get this kind of patriotism. Like, I'm not even American. And I was like, yeah, come on, America, go on. Like, you get that feeling with him. And that's throughout the entire film. And not only that, away from the story, the action in this film is so good. The action in this film, it feels like a kind of Jason Bourne, Paul Greengrass kind of style. They embrace the shaky cam a little bit, and my opinions on shaky cam are very mixed. But I think in certain films it works better than others. I think the type of film this is very kind of on the edge, very kind of thriller style, very tense in many scenes. The shaky cam works. That fight scene with Bucky on the bridge, they're doing this like hand-to-hand combat, and it's like a one shot, and they don't cut for a good few seconds, and you just get the scene of them, the amazing fight choreography, and you get them playing it out, and it just, again, it brings that tension, and it builds the stakes, really. And I think that's what good action's there to do. It's not just to be a good crowd-pleasing thing to see, right? It's not just to break up the story a little bit. The action should serve the story, and every single action scene in this film serves the story perfectly, whether it be the fight scene with Bucky on the bridge, whether it be Black Widow running away from the Winter Soldier, whether it be the first scene of the film on the ship, right, with Captain America beating, Batroc, defeating Batroc's group on the ship and saving the S.H.I.E.L.D. agents. Every scene in this film leads to the story, and that's what makes it good, because we understand this character. He doesn't want to do kind of what he's doing, but he has to. It's something that it's almost like a burden on the character, really. And this, again, watching it retrospectively, all adds up to what we see in Endgame at the end, with all that he wanted was just a quiet life with Peggy, right? That's all he wanted. But the type of character that he is, he can't stand by and let things just go wrong in front of him. Someone has to take a stand, right? Someone has to, and he leads this little group, with Sam Wilson and Natasha Romanoff, Black Widow. He leads that group. He leads that kind of mini rebellion against Hydra and to bring Hydra down. And that's one of the best things in the film. The story in this film is the strong point. The story and how the action links into the story is a very good strong point. Performances, great across the board. There's not one bad performance in this film from anybody, even the mild supporting cast, like a Frank Grillo or someone like that. Like, everyone plays their part in this film perfectly. Sam Jackson is phenomenal. Nick Fury, that scene in the elevator where he's talking about his granddad, it's a great scene. Chris Evans is incredible as Captain America, who's born to play this role, in my opinion. He's just perfect in the role. He brings such a softness and a sensitivity to the character that contrasts well with this. This is a character who could completely destroy anyone, yet he's so kind and soft and sensitive that Evans really brings that through really well. Scarlett Johansson's fantastic as well as Black Widow. You get to learn more about who she is. You get to learn more about her backstory in this film. Her interactions with the Winter Soldier in the past and her kind of view on the world and that comparison between her and Steve and how her relationship with Steve grows over time in the film and how his ideology kind of reflects onto her and changes her as a person. Johansson really plays that well. That scene where they're talking with each other at Sam Wilson's place, and they're talking to each other about would you trust me to save your life? And Cap's like, I would now. You know what I mean? So their chemistry is fantastic. They build a strong bond in this film that we didn't really get to see before. The music is fantastic as well. Henry Jackman, once again, is brilliant. His score for this film is one of my favorite scores from the MCU. It's a very exciting, very enthralling soundtrack in a way. It gets you, it adds to the scenes. That's the best way to describe it. It adds to the scenes perfectly in the film. In every scene, it ups the stakes, it ups the tension, it ups the ante in a way. It makes the scenes better. So that's the best thing that's what a good soundtrack to a film should do. It should make the film better and it should add to it, not distract from it, but it should add to it, right? And that's definitely what this film does. Away from that, Robert Redford as well. I forgot to mention Robert Redford. Robert Redford's really good in this film too. And I think having an actor like him, an actor like Robert Redford, who's so kind of, people associate him so much with the era that this film is taking inspiration from. It makes it more kind of believable in a way. Like, you see Robert Redford in this film and you're like, okay, this makes it feel more like a 70s thriller, like a 70s political drama. It makes it feel like that more. And it's not like Robert Redford's here to just collect a paycheck. Like, he's actually acting in this film. You see good acting in this film. It's such a contrast between it's so strange. The same studio that did Thor: The Dark World, the same writers who wrote Thor: The Dark World, can do this. It just annoys me that we got such an average film in Thor: The Dark World when it had the same production team, the same screenwriters, and yet Captain America: The Winter Soldier is a phenomenal film with a great story, compelling characters. It just annoys me a little bit in a way. It's a bit disappointing that Thor: The Dark World just was completely almost forgotten about in a way. But we do get a fantastic film with The Winter Soldier. Like I said, it's one of the best films in the genre. It's one of my personal favorite films in the MCU from start to finish. It's completely enthralling, completely engaging. Performances are excellent. Music is fantastic. The visual effects can go and come and go a little bit. The visual effects aren't phenomenal. They're not groundbreaking, but they blend in well. The environments are really good. The background environments are good. Just sometimes they can go a little bit up and down a little. It's not amazing, the visual effects. They're not consistent, but they're good. Right? It's not something to ruin the film. It's not like you'll watch the visual effects in this film and it'll be like, oh god, this is terrible. Like, it's not like that. So yeah, guys, I really like Captain America: The Winter Soldier. It's one of my favorite films from this series. If you've not watched it, or if you haven't watched it in a while, go back and watch it, and you'll know exactly what I'm saying. But you'll understand why I love this film so much. So yeah, getting on to the next film, which is for a lot of people their personal favorite film in the MCU, and that is Guardians of the Galaxy. Now, Guardians of the Galaxy, I remember when this film was announced back in like 2012, when this film was announced, and everyone was like, what is that? I remember even at the time, I was probably only about, 15, 16. This is when I really started to, get into the film world and getting kind of reviewing films and talking about films. So even at the time, I was like, I don't know what they are. I grew up with a lot of Marvel properties. I grew up with the Spider-Man series, the X-Men series, the Hulk series in the 90s, the animated shows. I read a lot of comics when I was younger. I played a lot of the games, and I had no idea who Guardians of the Galaxy were. I had no idea. So when it was announced, I was a bit baffled. Did a bit of research on them, watched a few people talk about them, and I was like, it's a film about a group of people that consists of some cocky guy, some green alien warrior, like a talking angry raccoon, a tree, like, and some like I just don't understand. Like, what is this? Like, it was so different from anything that Marvel had done. Very, very different. Definitely a risk as well, because considering this series already had kind of a fan base at this point, would people be willing to give a film like this a chance? Like, would they accept it into this world? Would it be believable in this world? And oh my god, is it good? It works so well, and it's mainly because of James Gunn. This film doesn't work without James Gunn. I've always been very, very strong on that point. The reason this film works so well is because of James Gunn. Now, it's not like we haven't seen films like this before, right? This film has a bit of Star Wars in it. It has a little bit of Indiana Jones in it. It has a little bit of, it has just a bit of like a Firefly, Serenity kind of feel. So it's not like things like this haven't been done before. But I don't think they've been done as well as this for what it is. Star Wars is still the best space sci-fi film ever, the first one. I don't think this is very far away from that, though. And it's because of James Gunn, what he does with this film. He takes the characters that are very weird, very strange in nature. The story's very odd. And he plays on that and almost very self-aware. And I think that's the best part of Guardians of the Galaxy. It doesn't take itself serious. If this film tried to take itself too serious, it wouldn't work. It would not work. If this film was given to a director who takes his work very seriously, if this, like Chris Nolan couldn't do a film like this. This film wouldn't work with a Chris Nolan or a Zack Snyder or a Michael Bay or anyone like that. It wouldn't work with a director like that. It needed a director like James Gunn, a director who is fun, has a good sense of humor, very self-aware, and project his own personality into the film. If you've watched any James Gunn interviews, if you've read anything about James Gunn, this film is James Gunn on screen. Like, it's wacky. I've just burped. I seem to burp on every podcast. I don't know why I do this. It's so disgusting. I'm so sorry, guys. I keep burping it. It's this water. It's really nice water. This Volvic. I'm not like this isn't sponsored or anything, but it's really nice water. But God me, makes you burp. Jesus Christ. Anyway, away from that, back on talking about Guardians of the Galaxy. Yeah, this film is 100% James Gunn. Chris Pratt is perfect in this film for this character. This is the film that really put Chris Pratt on the map. I know he was in films before this. I'm not trying to act like he wasn't good before this, right? He was in Her with Joaquin Phoenix. He was brilliant in that. He was in Zero Dark 30. He was in Parks and Rec. So he already had a bit of a reputation before getting Guardians. But this is the film that really shot him off, not only because of the physical transformation, which was phenomenal, but his sense of humor, his comedic timing, the way he delivers his lines with a bit of sincerity and a bit of like he can do the drama very well, but his sharp wit, very Han Solo type, right? That's what people always say. He's like the Han Solo of this film, and you can see the comparisons there. Like he's the lovable rogue, right? That's what he is, and he's brilliant at that. Zoe Saldana's really good as Gamora. Batista is really good as Drax, even though this isn't the Drax that we have now, where he's constantly this comedic relief, right? He's not that, but he's still really good in this film, considering this is like very early in Batista's acting career, right? I mean, he was only acting for what, 4 years at this point. Like, you see his performance in something like Wrong Side of Town, and then you see his performance in Guardians of the Galaxy. And when you consider that's like only 4 years apart, his growth as an actor is brilliant. And I remember watching him when I was a kid. Like, I used to love wrestling when I was a kid. And I used to think one of the worst actors in wrestling was Batista. I thought he was awful. He was so boring when he talked. He had no personality. So for him to kind of really embrace this very odd property and play it so well was really shocking for me at the time. Obviously now we know what he's capable of, but at the time, very, very odd casting, but it worked really well. And he's very good in this film. Bradley Cooper, I'm not mad about Bradley Cooper as Rocket Raccoon. That's always been just knocked over my water. That's always been one of the things in this film that stands out for me. Has always been Bradley Cooper as Rocket Raccoon. I don't like the broken New York, Brooklyn accent that he does. It doesn't fit Rocket Raccoon. I know that sounds weird, but it's such a dodgy accent. Like, you can tell when you're listening to it, it's a dodgy Bradley Cooper accent. Like, it sounds like Bradley Cooper, but it sounds like Bradley Cooper trying to not be Bradley Cooper. And all you can hear is Bradley Cooper doing a really bad New York accent. And it's really distracting. Even like, this isn't just a thing with Guardians. This is him when he's in Endgame and when he's in the other Guardians films. That's the one thing that always takes me at the film is his performance as Rocket. I never got sold on him as Rocket Raccoon ever. It's so, and that's another thing. It's so obvious that he like did his lines away from the other actors. Like, he did them separately. It's so clear to tell because the way they're talking, the other actors, and the way he's talking is such on a different level as far as energy and enthusiasm, and their performances don't always blend together. And that's because Cooper was separate when he was recording his lines, and you don't feel that chemistry there, right? You don't feel that chemistry between that. So that's a negative that I've got with Guardians of the Galaxy, even though it's a very good film and I'll praise it to the high heavens. That's the one thing that bothers me in this film is Bradley Cooper as Rocket Raccoon. Vin Diesel as Groot. I mean, anyone could have played Groot. Vin Diesel's just there because he's a big name. Simple as that. Lee Pace as Ronan. This villain belongs. He's on the level of a Malekith in that sense. Not as bad. Like, really, what Ronan is a very poor version of Loki. Like, he's he's got a very similar story arc to Loki. He's someone who is a henchman of Thanos, right? To get the Infinity Stones. That's the role that Ronan has in this film, and I know he has the turn at the end where he turns on Thanos, and he kind of takes the Power Stone for himself and turns into the big bad of the film, I guess. But it's just motivations aren't there. Not really well written. The villain, the design isn't very great either. Like, it's a weird design. It's not a believable design. It just looks like an actor in really poor makeup. So the villain isn't good in Guardians. But the strength of this film doesn't come from the relationship between the protagonists and the antagonist. That's not where the strength lies in this film. Really, it doesn't matter who the villain is in this film, which is why it's not a massive problem that Ronan isn't a very good villain, because the main key of this film is the relationship between the characters. It's the writing, it's the banter, it's the sense of humor, it's the music. Like, the music in this film is unbelievable. Like, the way they use these classic, like, 80s music to really set this fun tone throughout the film, and almost play as, like, an inner monologue for the characters in a way. Like, it's really created by James Gunn. It's not like Suicide Squad, right, which tried to do Guardians of the Galaxy but just didn't understand how to do it, which was ironic because obviously now James Gunn's doing Suicide Squad, so that's a bit weird. But it's not like a film like that where they just take popular songs, put them in the film, and people are like, oh, that's an Eminem song. I know that song. That's a Queen. That's a good. This scene's amazing. It's not like that. That's not what this is. The scenes serve the story. The music, serves the story. It serves the scenes that they're in, and it serves the story really well. So that's a very strong positive for me. Music's fantastic. The visual effects can range anywhere from really good to okay. Like, they're not incredible or anything, but they're not terrible either. Like, they're pretty good visual effects. This, however, this is a problem that Phase 2 had more than Phase 1. And I haven't discussed it yet, but it's present in all the Phase 2 films. I think it was with the first Avengers film. I think. I could be wrong on this. Maybe it was the first Thor film, but I kind of feel like it was the first Avengers film. Marvel went from doing their films, shooting them on traditional film. They went from that to then shooting in digital. And people who are watching this are going to be like, what difference does that make? Trust me, it makes a massive difference. The visual style of this film is so bland. It's so bland. Oh, honestly, the film is so washed out with color. There's no color in this film. It's a very dirty looking film in a way. And that sounds like a weird statement. And that sounds like something weird to moan about. But this film, it's just like a wash with this very hazy, like, murky kind of filter over it. And what that is, because the difference between shooting on film and shooting on digital is that shooting on digital doesn't capture shadows. It doesn't capture colors as well as film does. So when you shoot on film, you can tell when a movie's shot on film because of the contrast between the colors and the blacks, right? If you watch a Chris Nolan film, if you watch a Tarantino film, you can tell these films are shot on film because of the colors in the film. The colors are very bright and very, very out there, very vibrant. The blacks are very good. The shadows are very prominent. We don't get that in Guardians of the Galaxy. And I think a film like this, like a style like that, works for a film like Captain America: The Winter Soldier. it works for a film like that because it's a very kind of cloudy, grey, kind of darkish film in a way. So the lack of color kind of works. For a film like this that's got such a vibrant story, a vibrant setting, this film needed to be shot on film. It's the one thing that really bugs me every time I watch it. Every time I watch Guardians of the Galaxy, it sticks out like a sore thumb for me. And I know this could be classed as like nitpicking. I know people might listen to this and think, Simon, you're just nitpicking. I don't think it's nitpicking. I think the color grading and colors in a film are very important. I'm not saying every film needs to be shot on film. Not every movie needs to be shot with film, right? I'm not saying that. Like I said, Captain America: The Winter Soldier, a film like that, I think that works good being shot on digital because it kind of washes out the colors and it makes it feel more dark and grim. For a film like this, that's so reliant on this bright, kind of vibrant characters and this comedy and the bright setting, like we're in space and we're on all these different planets, the colors don't pop like they should do. The shadows don't pop like they should do. Like what should be like black shadows are like this very hazy gray, and it just makes the image look so flat. It makes the image look flat and boring to look at. This is a very boring film to look at, weirdly. You'd think a film like this would be great to look at, right? This film is boring to look at. This film needed to be shot on film or spent. It either needed to be shot on film or have more time post-production to be color graded properly. That's what this film needed. It needed more time to be color graded properly because it's so washed out with colors. I mean, there's loads of videos of this on YouTube. If you want to go on YouTube and watch comparison videos between what people who've actually color graded the same scenes between what the original version was that Marvel did and their version with proper color grading, it's so different. It's so different. Like it's literally, there's no comparison between the two. Like, color grading is very important. And now I'm going on a bit of a tangent, but trust me, it's so noticeable. It's so bland to look at this film. It's so dry. There's no color there. And a film like this needs that. A film like this needs color. It needs vibrancy. It needs energy in the visuals, and that's not there in this film. So that's my main gripe with Guardians of the Galaxy. Those two things would be the main gripe for me? Would be the lack of a visual style for me is a big problem. And the Bradley Cooper Rocket Raccoon thing. Ronan, the villain thing would be an issue if it weren't for the fact that really this film isn't about the villain, really. That's not really important to it's a plot point more than an essential storytelling thing. It's not really that. The villain's kind of separate in that sense. But yeah, those are the things that bother me the most, would be the bland visual style and Bradley Cooper's Rocket Raccoon. Everything else I love in this film. I love the interactions between the characters. I love the music choices. I love the humor. The writing's really clever and really funny. And it's a very entertaining film to watch. It's just those little problems hold it back for me. So I love the film. It's a brilliant film. I love it. I just think if those things would have been tweaked, maybe this film would have been better. I think if this film was given to a better cinematographer and was either shot on film or had more time to be color graded properly, it could have been better. But unfortunately, we didn't get that. So again, not bad, doesn't ruin the film, but just brings it down a little bit to stop it being better than it probably could have been. So away from Guardians of the Galaxy, I think it's Avengers, isn't it? Is it Avengers Age of Ultron? That's a big jump, isn't it? We had like two films in 2014 and 2013, and then we kind of just jumped to like mid 2015 with Avengers Age of Ultron. So Avengers Age of Ultron, coming off the first Avengers, coming off all the Phase 2 films that have been leading up to it. Right. This is going to be tough, guys. Avengers Age of Ultron. Do I like Avengers Age of Ultron? Yes. Yeah, kind of. Okay. I kind of like it. Why do I like Avengers Age of Ultron? The characters, the interactions between the characters are brilliant, probably better than they were in the first film. The characters have so much chemistry. The actors are so more comfortable in their roles at this point. You can really tell that it's not hard for these people now. It's not hard for the actors to play these characters. It's so natural, and their interactions between each other, that they're so comfortable with each other at this point that every scene, I could just watch a film with the characters just together in a room talking. That's the best parts of the film, like the when they're all trying to lift Thor's hammer in the bar. That's one of my favorite film scenes of the film. That scene's fantastic. Oh, it kills me sitting on this bed. I can't wait to go to the desk. But that's one of the best scenes in the film. All those scenes of the characters just being themselves, interacting with each other, are brilliant. However, Avengers Age of Ultron suffers from a very similar problem that Iron Man 2 did. And what I mean by that is there's just too much going on in this film. There's too much going on in this film. You look at the first Avengers film, it's a very simple premise in a way, right? That the first Avengers film, it's about gathering these unique people together to fight a threat bigger than anything else that the world's seen before, right? That's the whole concept of the first film, is building the tension between the characters. They kind of have a bit of a break up, and then they get back together. They unite to fight a bigger threat. This film, there's too much going on. There's too much story threads, and it's a very unfocused film. Joss Whedon's gone on record to say this film literally almost killed him to make. And you can see it, because this film is really one of the only films in the MCU that feel like it's been studio interfered. It feels like Feige and Marvel were saying to Whedon, okay, you want to tell this story of the Avengers creating their own enemy in Ultron. They have to fight their own threat. It's very clear that that's what he wanted to do. He wanted to tell the story of Ultron, and the Avengers kind of creating their own dark side in a way, creating their own antagonist, their own nemesis. That's the main thing that Joss Whedon clearly wanted to tell. But then you get all this other stuff on top of it. You get the introduction of Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver, which gets rushed over very quickly in a very poorly executed exposition scene. We get the scenes between Bruce and Natasha, which are so out of nowhere. Like, these characters barely have any scenes together in the previous films. The actors don't have great chemistry with each other. It just kind of comes out of nowhere, and the scenes are kind of awkward in a way. We get all of these teasers for future films, right? The scene with we get the Black Panther setup with the introduction of Ulysses Claw. We get the scenes where Scarlet Witch kind of goes into the characters' heads and plants these visions, and we get a setup for Endgame, right, with all the Avengers dead in Tony's head, right? We get that setup. Then we get the setup with the Mind Stone and the introduction of Vision. We get the whole thing with Thor seeing, Asgard, or the people of Asgard dying, right? We get that scene. We get the scene of Cap and Peggy Carter just wanting that last dance together that we finally get at Endgame. But we get all these scenes, and they take away from the main focus of the story, right? That's the big problem in this film. There's so much going on that it feels very unfocused. It feels very unfocused. It feels very tacked on. A lot of the scenes feel very tacked on. Thor in this film, he feels so pushed into this story. Like, he's needed to create vision. Apparently, Thor's lightning can create vision. Like, I didn't know Thor's hammer could bring life to people. That's okay. Weird. It's magic lightning, I guess, but it's just, again, bizarre, very strange, very weird. The scene with him going to that lake with Eric Selvig. I mean, there's literally a scene where the Avengers lose. They capture when Hulk goes crazy, right? When Scarlet Witch goes into his head. Hulk goes crazy and destroys that South African village, right? He goes crazy, nuts, destroys everything. They then capture Hulk, turns back into Bruce Banner, and they go into hiding on Hawkeye's farm with his family. And literally, they just get there, and then Thor starts to have this twitchy flashback, and then decides to just, I'm going to go and do my own thing. Bye. Like, it's just so out of nowhere. Like, you've literally just got here. Like, you've just got here. You've barely said hello to anyone. You've barely sat down, and already I'm like, oh, I forgot I need to set up Thor Ragnarok. Hang on, wait, I'm going to go off and do my own thing. It's so, like, out of nowhere, and it just doesn't fit what's going on in the story. Apparently, at this point, all the Avengers are supposed to be at rock bottom, right? They're at rock bottom. They don't know what to do. They're all feeling down. But Thor just decides to go and find this magic pool that will send him back into his dream. Like, stupid. It's so stupid. And you can tell the studio was just poking Joss Whedon and being like, don't forget, you need to set up Black Panther. You need to set up Thor Ragnarok, Joss. Come on. Like, you know, you need to set up all these future things that we need to do. Like, and it's so obvious. It's so obvious and distracting that it takes away from some of the good things that are in this film. Hawkeye is way better in this film. He's given a lot more development. He's treated very, very good in this film. And he gets the whole backstory with his family, and it brings the character, makes the character feel like an actual person. So that's a very strong positive that I have for the film. Like I said, the performances are all great. The performances are really good throughout the entire cast. They're all good in this film. The action is good. The action's all right. The opening scene where they go to get the Loki's staff, right? Loki's spear from the first film. That opening scene's really good. I mean, it feels very cartoony and very poorly. Like, the effects aren't great for it. They look a bit rubbery. The characters look a bit like rubber people. But it's still an entertaining scene. It's a good introduction to these characters. A very good introduction, like reintroducing the characters. But it just kind of goes nowhere. And also, wasn't Iron Man supposed to have stopped being Iron Man at the end of Iron Man 3? That's another thing as well that annoys me. Like, I love how that's completely glossed over. The big thing in Iron Man 3 was Tony Stark deciding that, you know what, there's more to life than being Iron Man. There's more to life than building these suits. So I find comfort with the people around me, right? That was the whole story of Iron Man, right? Of Iron Man 3, was him learning to be Tony Stark and not Iron Man. And then it's just completely glossed over. Nothing's said. He's just back in the Iron Man suit at the start of the film, fighting with the Avengers. Like, okay. Like, so out of nowhere, and it just doesn't fit what we've just seen before. Like, if you're going to have this shared universe, all this shared continuity, at least have shared continuity, right? At least, like, acknowledge the other films happened. Don't just ignore that Iron Man 3 happened, because really, if we're going on from this, if you're watching, you don't actually need to have seen Iron Man 3, really, because the whole point of that story was him getting rid of his demons in a way, and his demons are creating all these Iron Man suits. Those are his demons, right? They're a physical manifestation of his fact of his demons, and he gets rid of all that, which is, you know, a theoretical, not theoretical, a visual. It's a metaphor, right? It's a metaphor for him getting rid of his demons when all the suits blow up at the end of the film. He has the surgery, has the arc reactor taken out of his chest, and he's back to just being regular Tony Stark. So why on earth is he just back to being the Tony Stark from Iron Man 2? Like, it's so weird, God. It doesn't make sense. I don't know if this was a Joss Whedon thing or a Marvel thing. I don't know, but it really is very distracting. If you're trying to watch these films, like trying to binge watch them, if you're watching them one after the other, that's very distracting, and it sticks out like a sore thumb. Also, we have the same problem that we did in Guardians of the Galaxy, and I'm not going to keep going on about this because this is the problem that is in every single MCU film from here going forward. This boring color grading, this boring visual style that continues throughout the entirety of the MCU. And again, it's a thing here, and it makes the film ugly. This is a very ugly film. It's filled with like grays and browns and washed out colors, and it's a superhero film. It's a freaking comic book film with like overly muscular blokes and very like agile women dressed in colorful spandex costumes fighting a giant metal robot AI robot. Like, and it's just so boring. You don't even have a little bit of color there. You don't have no, it's just, they try to be so dark in visual, like with their visual style, and it just looks boring. Like every film from here on out looks boring, except from Guardians 2. Guardians 2 still has the washed out colors, but it has a better visual style. It has a far better visual style, so that's good. But every other film boring visually. And this is one of those films that are like that as well. So really, my thoughts on Avengers Age of Ultron would just be this. Love the character interactions. I like all the Ultron stuff. That's very interesting. And I like that storyline. I like how that plays out. Music's good. Everything else is just this. The main issue is definitely too much going on, unfocused story, boring visual style, and it's just too much, man. There's just too much going on there. It's like 5 films in one, and it's just too much. And it works better when you know. Like the film works better now because we've got the conclusion to what was set up in Age of Ultron. So retroactively works better than it did when it first released. But I'm just going to take it as a film on its own. Really, I'm not going to think. I'm trying to kind of separate myself as if I'm watching this for the first time. And if with me doing that, this film on its own merits doesn't really work, unfortunately. So it's a bit of a disappointment. It's definitely a drop down from the first Avengers. It's not the worst film in Phase 2. That is definitely Thor: The Dark World. It's not the worst film in Phase 2. I'd say it's probably the second worst film of the MCU. Personally, it's for me, that's what it is. It's the second worst film in Phase 2 of the MCU. Right, I don't know. Is Ant-Man part of Phase 2? I don't know. Hang on. Okay, bear with me 2 seconds, guys. I'm going to check if Ant-Man is part of Phase 2. I don't know if anyone's in if anyone's in the live chat, let me know. Is Ant-Man part of Phase 2? Because if it is, I'll talk about it. But I don't know if it is. I don't know if it's classed as being part of Phase 3. I'm not sure. Right. Let me look. Ant-Man Phase 2. Right. I think it is, guys. I think yes, it is. I think. Yeah, it is. Okay, Ant-Man is technically part of Phase 2. So we'll talk about Ant-Man. Ant-Man is one of those films similar to Guardians in that sense. This film is very funny, it's very entertaining, but it's also kind of boring. And the reason it's boring is not because of the performances. The performances are really good from the main cast, right? The performance is really good. Michael Douglas is fantastic in this film. He gives a lot of gravitas and a lot of a lot of presence to the film. Like it makes the film better. Just him being there in this role makes the film better. It's a weird thing to say, but when you watch the film, you know what I mean. Paul Rudd is brilliant in the film as well. He's really funny, plays the dramatic scenes really well. His comic timing, his wit, really, really funny, very good in the film. Michael Pena steals the film as Louise. He's so funny in this film. Like there is moments in this film where when he's on screen, I'm literally laughing out loud, like I'm bursting out laughing. So he's probably my favorite part of Ant-Man. Right, he's one of my favorite parts of Ant-Man. Is Michael Pena as Louise. People say he's a bit of a stereotype, and I could understand why people would say that. Like, if you're a Mexican and you watch this film, I can understand why you'd watch this film and be like, "Yeah, that's a stereotypical character right there. That's definitely a stereotype. That's a stereotype 100%." And I get that. I understand why people say that, but just on its own merits, I'm saying it more from what they do with the character. So what they do with the character, right? That scene, obviously, the scene that we all know from Ant-Man. The most memorable parts of Ant-Man is when they do the Louise recapping things, right? When he recaps a story and we get it shown to us, with Louise kind of narrating all these different characters. Those scenes are absolutely hilarious. And Michael Pena plays them really well. It's funny to watch. It's edited really well together. Those scenes are the best part of Ant-Man. All the shrinking scenes are really good as well. The scenes where Ant-Man's like tiny and he's trying to like navigate through different things that would be like really easy for like normal sized people to navigate, like trying to navigate through like a bath that's filling up with water. It's very unique and different. Like that's entertaining. Like trying to escape that rat. Like that's so weird, and it works though. It's really funny. The problem with Ant-Man is a problem that again has kind of tarnished a lot of other MCU films. And before I go on to this point, I'm just going to say, if anyone who's watching this, if you want any movie related questions answered, send them in on the live chat on YouTube, and I will answer them at the end of the show. So after this, I've talked about this topic. If there's any questions that you want answered at the end of the show, please send them in on the live chat on YouTube, and I'll be able to answer them at the end of the show. So if you have anything, put them in, and I'll get to it soon. But getting back onto Ant-Man, the villain, right? The villain is the worst part of this film, for many reasons. The motivation is there, I guess, because of the relationship he has with Hank Pym. He's this like understudy to Hank Pym who started to use the shrinking particles, and it started to kind of make him go a little bit mad. So that I can understand. So the motivations are kind of there. For me, it's the performance from that actor. And I've seen the actor somewhere before. He was in Black Mass. He was in Black Mass. He played that like FBI leader that takes over near the end of the film in Black Mass, and they end up finding Whitey Bulger. He's in that film, and he's only in that film for a little bit, and I thought he was pretty good in that. In this film, he feels so kind of cheesy and campy, and like he plays it so over the top. Like it really doesn't work, man. I'm just gonna say it, like he just doesn't work for me. It's not that the character's a bad character, because I think the character has motivation. However, the problem with his motivation for me is that it's not exactly linked to the main character. So the main character for the audience is Scott Lang, which is the Paul Rudd character. It's not Hank Pym. Hank Pym is the supporting character. So we're getting these scenes of the villain in this film, right? We're getting the scenes of him in the film, but they're all kind of building towards his relationship with the supporting character. So throughout this film, you kind of just feel like, why is Scott Lang there? I get it because he gets to be Ant-Man and he gets to do all this cool stuff, but like his only motivation really is to save Cassie at the end when he goes for Cassie, his daughter. That's his only motivation, really. However, apart from that, why is he getting involved in this? I don't really understand. Like, it doesn't make sense to me. It's more Hank Pym using him for a reason, right? But I don't really get why Scott is there doing this. Why is he helping these people? What's his motivation, right? That to me isn't very well thought out. And this, I think, comes back to the point with interference, right? Because the original director for this was Edgar Wright, one of the most unique directors out there. He'd been working to get an Ant-Man film done pre-MCU, so it was like around 2005, right? He's been working on this Ant-Man film for years and years and years. Finally gets the Ant-Man film greenlit with Marvel. They bring it into the Phase 2 MCU. But the only problem is that his version of Ant-Man doesn't fit what Marvel want to do with the character moving forward. So the two part ways, but they kind of still take elements from what Edgar Wright did with the story. And then they kind of refine it with different screenwriters, one of them being Paul Rudd as well. But they kind of refine, they take that story and work it and change it a little bit. But they still keep elements of Edgar Wright there. And you can see him coming through. Like there's no way anyone can tell me that those Louise scenes aren't a vision of Edgar Wright. Like you can't tell me the action scenes aren't a vision of Edgar Wright, because they are. It's so Edgar Wright. It's written all over it. However, the villain, that feels more bland, generic, studio produced. You know what I mean? Like that feels more like that. So Ant-Man is one of those films that is very funny, very entertaining, has a lot of humor. The humor is the best part of Ant-Man. It's a very funny film. The action's very good. It's very unique. And it creates for some very entertaining scenarios. So the action's something that sticks out a lot for me. However, everything else, yeah, average. Very average. This is a very average Marvel film for me. It's very average. It doesn't feel like, it doesn't stand out. It's not a Winter Soldier, right? It's not a Winter Soldier. It's not an Iron Man. It's not a Guardians. It's not anything like that. It's not really unique in that sense. It kind of feels like it has unique things in there, but I kind of feel the unique things that was in there was more because of what Edgar Wright was originally going to bring to the film, and they just kind of kept it because there was a good idea, rather than what the director brought to it. Because obviously originally it was going to be Edgar Wright, and then Peyton Reed was brought on to be the director. And Peyton Reed for me is a very average comedy director. He's not especially very great, right? He's not. So you get that kind of weird thing where you have one of the best comedy directors around in Edgar Wright, and then a very middling average director in Peyton Reed, and the two don't mesh well together. So that's a problem for me with Ant-Man. It's just, it feels very kind of misguided and underwhelming. Let's just say like that. Feels very underwhelming. But yeah, guys, that'll be it. Thank you very much for watching my show today. Thank you for sticking around if you've watched all of the show. I will be doing another podcast maybe tomorrow. I don't know. I might have a little bit of a rest tomorrow because I've done one like every day for like the past 5-6 days. So probably tomorrow we'll take a break as it is Sunday. But I'll probably be back on Monday doing another live show. I've loved doing it live. It's been weird to do a live show again because I haven't done a live show in so long. But it's been fun to do. Obviously, with me doing it live, it won't go up on SoundCloud and Spotify the same time as it does on YouTube. So if you do want to watch this again, you can watch it on YouTube again, but you will be able to get it on Spotify and SoundCloud eventually anyway. But the links for those are in the description, so you can go over there pretty soon and they'll be on there if you want to listen to it in audio form. But yeah, if you want to keep up to date with my live podcast, make sure you subscribe to my channel on YouTube, hit the notifications bell so you always stay in the loop with what I'm doing on my podcast. Go follow my Facebook page. It's YMB Productions on Facebook. Go on there and like my Facebook page, because if you do that, you'll be able to keep up to date with any content that I'll put on there. So yeah, guys, and also make sure if you go over to Spotify and SoundCloud, follow them, like them, share them around, tell your friends about it if they're into films, and we'll get a little community going. Before and talk about films. Nothing better for me than talking about films. I could talk about films all day. I could go for another 3 hours if I wanted to. Like, I love talking about films. So yeah, let's talk about films. Jump on the live chat on YouTube. Put in the comments. You know what I mean? Let's start talking about films, because that's what I love to do. So yeah, and also, guys, if you want to donate to the show, if you go onto my SoundCloud profile, there is a PayPal me link. There's a PayPal me link. If you want to go on there, if you want to support the show, make a little donation, that would be more than appreciated. You don't have to do that. It's not something I'm saying you have to do. Go and do this, right? I'm not that saying that. But if it's something that you're interested in, if you fancy donating anything to the show, then you're more than welcome to, and I'd be very, very appreciated. Like I said, I'll be doing another podcast in a few more days, probably Monday. I think tomorrow I'll take a break, but Monday I should be back doing another podcast. So until then, guys, take care of yourselves. Hope you've enjoyed the show. Love you all. And I'll see you very, very, very soon.